Welcome, Amudar Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories this hour. Israel's defense minister says Iran's supreme leader can no longer be allowed to exist after a missile damaged Soroka hospital. AFP reports Iran claims it targeted a nearby military site while Israel responds with strikes on nuclear locations in Arak and Natanz. Putin and Xi Jinping slam Israel's attacks on Iran as illegal and called for urgent de-escalation. According to the Kremlin, they agree there is no military solution to the crisis or Iran's nuclear dispute, says Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov. Top diplomats from France, Germany, the UK and EU plan to meet Iran's foreign minister in Geneva on Friday. According to them, they aim to diffuse tensions as Israel continues strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. Ukraine returns a new batch of prisoners of war from Russia following a deal reached in Istanbul. President Zelensky says as the swap process continues, the exchange includes young and severely wounded soldiers and forms part of a larger agreement involving thousands of POWs and people who are dead in the war. Gaza officials have said 25 people have died, including 15 who are awaiting aid after Israeli fire struck the Netzarim corridor early Thursday. Witnesses report tank shelling and airstrikes, while the Israeli army tells AFP it's looking into the incident. Hurricane Arak strengthens to a Category 4 with winds of 230 kilometers per hour, poised to strike Mexico's Pacific coast. That's what the U.S. Hurricane Center has said. President Sheinbaum urges residents in Oaxaca and Guerrero to stay indoors and follow official warnings. Thai PM Paetongtarn Shinawatra faces a political crisis after a leaked call with Cambodia's Hun Sen sparks outrage and splits her coalition. She apologizes for the audio, which shows her calling Hun Sen uncle and appearing to dismiss a Thai military chief. India's aviation regulator has warned Air India after it operated 3 Airbus jets without timely emergency equipment inspections. Documents seen by Reuters show the finding raises safety concerns just days after a deadly crash killed over 270 passengers. In day 7 of the Israel-Iran conflict, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed Iran will pay a heavy price. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz, meanwhile, has issued a fiery warning after the strike on Soroka Hospital. He has said Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei can no longer be allowed to exist, accusing him of personally ordering missile attacks on civilians and hospitals. Here's what Israel's Defense Minister had to say.
אני רוצה לומר שדיקטטור כמו חמינאי שעומד בראש מדינה כמו איראן וחרת על דגלו את השמדת מדינת ישראל, את המטרה הנוראית הזאת של השמדת ישראל, הוא לא יכול.
Iran insists it targeted a military intelligence base next to the hospital, not the medical center. The Revolutionary Guard says guided missiles struck the IDF command site in Gavyam Technology Park. Tehran is also warning the US not to intervene, stating all options are on the table. Iran's atomic energy body has accused Israel of violating international law. Midnight strikes took place, though. Israel carried out fresh strikes on Iran, hitting the nuclear reactor in Arak and a facility in Natanz. The military has said the attacks were aimed at stopping nuclear weapons development. These latest strikes come just hours after an Iranian missile hit Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, southern Israel. At least 40 people were injured. Parts of the hospital were destroyed as well. Now, globally, leaders are urging calm. China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin have held a call, saying a ceasefire is the top priority. Here's what the Russian president commented.
С помощью США или без помощи США. Просто убиваете Хаминей. Какая будет ваша реакция и реакция России?
Надеюсь, что это будет самым правильным ответом на ваш вопрос. Я даже обсуждать такой возможности не желаю.
France is urging citizens to leave Israel and Iran. Here's what the French foreign minister had to say.
En Iran, tous les Français qui souhaitent quitter le pays et qui ne se sont pas encore fait connaître auprès de nos services sont invités à se signaler dès.
Diplomatic talks are planned in Geneva tomorrow as world powers try to contain the escalating war.
En Iran, tous les Français qui souhaitent quitter le pays et qui ne se sont pas encore fait connaître auprès de nos services sont invités à se signaler dès que possible à notre ambassade. Le passage est possible sans visa vers l'Arménie et la Turquie dont les frontières sont ouvertes.
Jordan Cope, Middle East expert, is joining us live from Erfurt in Germany. Jordan, thank you for being with us today on NewsX World. Firstly, what do you make of this allegation that Israel has leveled and these strong statements that have also come in after this attack on the Soroka hospital? They're claiming that this is a big step up for them. And, Israel cuts going ahead and saying that Khamenei has no right to exist anymore.
First and foremost, it's important to understand that Defense Minister Katz is still responsible to Netanyahu at the end of the day when it comes to a lot of military decisions. But what Katz has ultimately suggested is something that's becoming more and more clear. That is that this operation likely will eventually target the Ayatollah Khamenei for being the mastermind of terrorism over the last many years that has targeted Israel by proxies of Iran, which have received hundreds of millions of dollars, including proxies in Gaza like Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, like Hezbollah and Lebanon, etc. And so it seems increasingly concerning now that the Israeli death toll is up to 24. Iran has exercised absolutely zero regard for civilian lives in Israel, targeting residential areas, targeting areas next to embassies, and now hitting a hospital in Beersheba. And Iranian misinformants, supporters of the regime, are trying to lie however they can to cover it up. I've seen people on Twitter now supposedly claiming that there were tanks underneath the hospital. You can't possibly make up any blatantly more misinformation on their behalf to try to justify their crimes, their war crimes in this current effort.
Jordan, also I have to ask you now about where you see this situation headed between the two countries. Do you believe the fighting is only going to intensify in the next 24 to 36 hours? Also, are we looking at a possible direct involvement of the United States to this conflict?
President Donald Trump has made quite clear that his patience has run thin, and his ultimate goal at this point is a quote-unquote complete surrender. A complete surrender probably does not simply just refer to the abandonment of Iran's nuclear program. Perhaps at this point it may refer to something even greater than that. And so the question that you've asked, whether fighting will intensify, Israel has already established air superiority. Trump has claimed that America has established air superiority, indicating that even though the US isn't directly involved, it's probably more directly involved than we actually think. All of this being said, in the past few days, Israel has targeted weapon launch sites where ballistic missiles have been launched, and Israel supposedly to date has eliminated roughly half of them. And it's to no coincidence that Iranian rocket salvos have become smaller and smaller in terms of the number of rockets that are getting launched each time towards Israel. And so if anything, I actually expect the Iranian response perhaps to get even lesser and less. But what remains to be seen is what surprises Iran might have They have a lot of bark. The question is, do they actually have the resources to back it up?
Jordan, thank you for joining us with your perspective on that big story. Moving on now, at least 25 people, including 15 aid seekers, have been reportedly killed by Israeli shelling in central Gaza. According to the Civil Defense Agency, officials say those killed were waiting near an aid distribution point, one of many that Gaza's tribal committee now warns are becoming deadly traps. The committee has urged Palestinians to stop gathering in border zones labeled as aid sites by Israel, calling them death traps that have already claimed hundreds of lives. In a statement, they called for safe and coordinated entry of humanitarian aid, stressing that protecting lives is a national duty. This comes just days after Israeli forces killed 65 more aid seekers in Khan Yunis. The Gaza death toll has now surpassed 55,400 since October, according to health authorities. Meanwhile, more than 50 Israeli hostages, both dead and alive, are still with Hamas. Martin Sa-Erez, international affairs expert, is joining us live from Quito in Ecuador. Martin, welcome to the broadcast. Do you believe that the conflict in Gaza is going to continue with as much aggression as we've seen in previous months, despite now Israel's focus also being the war in Iran?
Unfortunately, yes. I think the war will keep going. I don't think that this war in Gaza is going to end anytime soon. Israel is fighting several fronts at the same time, and we need to understand that the Gaza war is actually directly connected to the Iranian regime and the war against Iran. So I think, unfortunately, this war will keep going. Hamas has absolutely no intention in finishing this war, even though they're losing a lot of lives. Palestinian people are suffering. They're losing a lot of lives. And this can be directly stopped by Hamas surrendering, giving back the hostages, and a complete surrendering of their agenda and their terror group.
Yes, but those negotiations seem to have hit a dead end for now. Do you see them restarting in the next few days, or is that looking unlikely?
I think talks and negotiations will keep going, but the question is if Hamas is going to accept. I mean, every day, the Israeli delegation, with the help of the mediation of the US and other countries, are trying to get to a negotiation to get the hostages back. Israel is absolutely eager to take the Israeli hostages back, but every time it does, Hamas is rejecting it because Hamas is no longer, they have never been in a position that they're going to surrender their terror ideology. The war is against Hamas, not against the Palestinian people in Gaza, and they have no control of the politics that are being implemented in Gaza because Hamas controls it. So the only way that this war can be ending is by absolutely overcoming and finishing the job against Hamas, which is a terror organization.
Yes, Martin, also, as far as aid is concerned, now it is important to, of course, get aid out to the people in Gaza, but it's also important to keep them safe while that aid is being distributed. How is that going to happen, particularly after these latest reports?
So first of all, we need to start by saying that Hamas is not reliable. Hamas controls the Ministry of Health of Gaza. Every time they have been giving false statements, false numbers. It has been corroborated by the US intelligence that they have been lying a lot. It's absolutely unfortunate that a lot of people are dying, but we can no longer trust in their words. And again, what Israel is supposed to win by killing innocent civilians? The only thing that can happen is that it can harm Israel international relations and reputation around the world. So I think it's absolutely false, the fact that Hamas is saying that the Israeli army is killing innocent civilians. There has been a lot of examples of Hamas people shooting at innocent civilians in order to blame Israel and to win the mediatic war. The only war that Hamas is winning against Israel is the media and propaganda war that unfortunately has been successful in blaming Israel for all of the bad things that are going on in Gaza because of the terror group Hamas, which is killing their own people.
Martin, appreciate you joining us with your perspective on that story. The Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda are all set to sign a historic peace agreement on the 27th of June 2025 to bring an end to the ongoing conflict in eastern Congo. According to the United States State Department, the signing will be witnessed by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The agreement includes several key provisions such as facilitating the return of refugees and internally displaced people, as well as the conditional integration of non-state armed groups. It also outlines the establishment of a joint security coordination mechanism between the two nations. Additionally, the deal includes commitments to respect territorial integrity, a prohibition of hostilities, and the disengagement and disarmament of armed groups. The agreement was finalized after 3 days of constructive dialogue between technical teams from both countries, with the text being initialed on the 18th of June. Now, the peace talks brokered by the United States aim to stabilize the region after months of escalating violence, including the advance of the M23 rebel group. The U.S. State Department has issued a joint statement highlighting this significant step towards peace in the region. Mahmoud Mohammad Nuruddin, African research journalist, is joining us live from Africa. Thank you for speaking with us, Mahmoud, on NewsX World. How significant is this peace agreement, and what are likely to be its ramifications?
Very significant, and we are hoping that this peace agreement will come to pass. You know, since December last year, there were efforts to sign a peace deal. It failed. This year, about 2 attempts were made, but it didn't succeed. So many people are saying that this particular one would come to pass. I mean, DR Congo issue or conflict has to do with lives and livelihoods. People have traveled, people have been displaced, people have been forced out of their homes. These are people who would want to see peace return to DR Congo, especially in the eastern part of the country, Goma and the rest. So if this comes to pass, is going to be a greater news to the people of DR Congo. But the issue has to do with 3 things that have been considered in this particular deal. One has to do with political security and economic, interest. So people are asking, who is going to benefit? Who is going to benefit from this deal? Who is going to benefit from the economic aspect of this deal? Political aspect, security aspect, who is going to benefit? And that has been the questions that people ask in DR Congo. They want to know, how will the deal address this to ensure that both countries would not have any concerns in future? You know, attempts have been made in the past, and this citizens of DR Congo wouldn't want to see such an attempt failed and trigger anything in the near future. So the questions, they ask questions, they want to know, clarify issues. But for peace, people are calling for it in DR Congo.
Mahmoud, is it correct that the United States has brokered this peace deal? They're the ones who've intervened, and which is why that agreement signing could happen in the presence of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio?
Yes, exactly. That was the statement issued by both countries, that the U.S. has actually, they've met. They've had about 3 days meeting to look at the issues and address what needs to be addressed. And Qatar actually initiated something, and they were part of the meeting to observe and get to know what actually happened. And so, based on the statement from the U.S. and these 2 countries, something has been agreed upon, and they are going to sign the deal on June 27th. Like I mentioned, we wouldn't know what would happen. It has happened before between the M23 rebels group, and then even Angola coming in to help, but eventually nothing came off. So we don't know what will happen between these 2 technical team members who met to agree on these things. Probably some of the issues might be disagreed later, and we might not see any agreement being signed. But we are hoping, to see the agreement signed so that we see peace return to DR Congo. And maybe US, because US is one of the biggest powerful countries, they might be able to achieve this, and that is why these two countries are willing to sign the deal. But another question that they ask is about what is the interest of US in this particular deal? DR Congo, especially in the eastern part,
Yes.
has been in conflict for some months now because of the natural resources.
Okay.
So people are suspecting, is it because of the natural resources that these countries want to play a role in the, peace agreement?
Okay. Mahmood, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on that story. We're out of time. On that note, we are going to take a short break. We will continue to bring you more news and updates from around the world. Stay tuned to NewsX World.